Welcome everybody to Coffee with Cow podcast, run by Learn International. My name is Chris Lawler. I'm the CEO of Learn International. We're a provider based in Ireland. And today we are talking with Pingchien Neo from the University of Florida International Engineering Program. She's the director there. Thanks very much for being with us, Ping.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have a chance to talk to people in different subsectors of international education. And I know that, the STEM area, particularly engineering, is one that can be particularly challenging. So I'm hoping that we can kind of chat through a few of the things that, you're finding difficult, roadblocks that you kind of typically come up against, and some kind of ways that you've managed to find around it. But let's start by just looking and painting a picture for people in terms of how you got to where you are, because part of what I want for this podcast is to be able to show a little bit of wisdom and a little bit of advice to the next generation about, so many students that study abroad really want to go into a career in it. And, I was speaking a couple of days ago with Heather Sheeman from Dayton University, and the fact that international education is now a profession in its own right and has built it out, over the last 20 odd years. It's something that students can really aspire to. So that's what I would like. And then also maybe to talk a little bit about, our current crisis and what that means for you guys specifically and where we're going, that type of thing. When you were in Berkeley as a computer support consultant, did you have any ridiculous questions?
90% of the questions were, like rebooting a computer, and the other 10% was related to questions like, did you save your file before it crashed? And no, we cannot retrieve your file if it is not saved. We can write a note for your professor saying that your computer crashed, but that is all we can do. And no, we cannot write your paper for you.
Your own study abroad experience, obviously must have shaped the way you approach, your own personal approach to international education and the professional perspective. But it seems that your study abroad was more full degree rather than a lot of the things that are done these days in shorter terms and semesters and even shorter than that. What's your feeling on that kind of student experience, full degree, full year, in comparison to, say, spring break or, kind of micro study abroad stuff?
Well, so yeah, my study abroad experience isn't the traditional study abroad for a semester or a summer per se. I did the international student route, and it has really shaped who I am and even brought me to where I am now. I often get students asking me, so have you studied abroad before? What's your study abroad experience? And so if I'm an American citizen now, but I grew up in Malaysia. And so in a way, I feel like sometimes I'm still abroad. And that really brings home the fact that we are so global and we could be at anywhere and still feel a part of the global society. My experience is that when you do a whole degree abroad, if someone has the chance, then it's different. You get to really live there and be part of the community and experience what it's like, and you're not under the pressure of getting everything done, seeing everything in 6 months, trying to do everything all at once, and you get a more relaxed time frame to do everything that you want. But in that sense, there's also the built-in complacency that I think that, oh, I have time to do this and I have time to do that. But by the time you have to leave, you realize I didn't do all that I need to do, which is okay. One of the things I try to tell my students is that the fear of missing out, it's okay, because you can go back. You get to go back. And now there is so much to see that you don't have to do it all at once. So that's my experience, and really enjoyed having the opportunity to study in different countries, different continents, and to work abroad. And that's really been important in shaping my experience and my profession today. And as you know, I didn't plan to get into the field of international higher ed, and I kind of stumbled upon it because I didn't come from an international or even an education background. I came from an engineering background. And it's been a little bit of a learning curve for me in the beginning to navigate the landscape of education.
Maybe you're a little bit of a serial student. I'm looking at, you're currently studying for your third degree in engineering, albeit a higher level than the other two. And is it environmental engineering, environmental something, something?
It's an environmental engineering, which I'm sure you can relate to, but its focus is on engineering education.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's looking at the impact of education in terms of international higher ed. So I was looking for a way to incorporate what I do as a profession into my studies.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, myself and my wife Cara, who runs the business with me, both have had grand designs of PhDs a number of years ago, and then we realized, how would we have the time? But then I speak to somebody like yourself, and I can't imagine how all the programs that you're building, all the different responsibilities you have, and you're doing a PhD. Amazing stuff, absolutely amazing. Tell me, when you were in Malaysia, did you find any explosives or nuclear materials?
I cannot tell you that.
I knew that was going to be the answer. That's brilliant. So, for the listeners, Ping has an undergraduate degree in nuclear engineering, a postgraduate master's in nuclear engineering, a second master's in industrial engineering, and is now taking her PhD in environmental engineering. So, a sucker for that continual study. And I think that's great because you're really living what you're preaching to students. But why did you choose Switzerland? Which course did you do there, and why did you choose it?
I moved to Switzerland to do my master's in nuclear engineering at ETH Zurich. And at that time, it was a brand new program that was completely in English, and it was funded by the industry. And it was a very novel program where we would spend the first semester at EPFL in Lausanne, and then the rest of the time at ETH Zurich. So really they wanted to incorporate the expertise of both universities with industry's input. And tuition was free. As you know, in Europe, we only had to pay the student fees. So it was a great opportunity to get my master's degree. And at that time, Switzerland was using 40% of their national energy supply from nuclear. So they really do what they preach. So it was a great way to learn about the nuclear industry.
Then where did you go after Switzerland? Where did your career take you?
After graduating from my master's, I worked at a nuclear power plant in Leibstadt. So that was a really cool job because I get to work in an actual nuclear power plant. I've heard all of the Homer Simpson jokes related to.
Well, I have to scratch out the next half hour of my podcast now.
Everyone was all about the Homer Simpson jokes, and it was really interesting, but they did not have a lot of female engineers working there. I was in the design division, and a lot of them were men, and a lot of them were from Switzerland and from Germany. So I think besides me, there was only one other woman engineer there. So it was a really interesting experience. And I really enjoyed working there because they really focus on the work-life balance and outreach to the public. After working at the nuclear power plant, I moved to Florida for family reasons and got a job at the University of Florida. I was teaching nuclear engineering classes for 2 years before I moved into my current position.
Was it your plan to teach, or was that just what was available at the time when you went to Florida?
As you know, in Gainesville, it's primarily the university and the hospital. But I was lucky to be able to get a job as a lecturer teaching nuclear engineering. And it was a good experience, and it taught me that I am not really passionate about teaching in a big class setting. I enjoy advising and mentoring students on a one-on-one basis and not in a big classroom.
That's really interesting. I was waiting for, I'm not really passionate about teaching, full stop. Imparting knowledge comes through various different means, and that individual one-on-one piece is so important for certain types of students, but it also is important for the person that is delivering it.
This big misconception that because you are trained in something that you are qualified to teach in it. So I was qualified in nuclear engineering, but I was not qualified to teach because I had no pedagogical background. I had no teaching experience. And so it was also a shock to learn that there's a disconnect between what I know and what I can deliver. And that was a really humbling experience.
Can we unpack that a little bit? Talk us through when you made that realization. You know, you're standing in a class and you're just not able to get your message across. Or how did that actually manifest?
Actually, the realization came only recently when I started my PhD in engineering education, when I took a class called Foundations of Engineering Education. So the premise of engineering education is to learn about theories and frameworks on how to teach students better in engineering. So that was when I started learning about the different learning theories and teaching theories and realized that that's right. Like just because you know a subject does not mean that you know the methods and you have the skills to teach the subject.
Which is more important for you? Is it the industrial practical experience or the ability to teach?
I think they go hand in hand. And at University of Florida last year, we started a Department of Engineering Education, which will be focused on teaching faculty how to teach and how to incorporate new teaching methods based on theory and practices on how to teach, because we will get a lot of professors who are top class, world class experts in their fields, but are not, they're trying to teach at their peer level and not to the student level.
So what happened? Where did they jump from teaching to international programs? I'm sure it was not a full jump, but you must have been doing them together.
I had applied for a job at the UF International Center, and I did not get the job because I had no experience in study abroad or international education, but I had mentioned to the dean that that was a area that I was passionate in and I was trying to get into. And at that time, engineering had no programs, no concerted efforts to start, develop, or manage programs. We had one faculty led program, and that was it. We had a few exchanges, but they were mostly not viable because of the course offerings or because of the semester dates. And so he said that that is one of the areas that the university is focusing on, and that is something that the College of Engineering is interested in expanding. So I had a conversation with her in depth, and we crafted a position for me to transfer into and to start leading the program.
That's amazing. So you literally made the job that you wanted to do.
Sort of, yeah. There's been a few tweaks along the way and adding on and taking off responsibilities, yeah.
What's happening now? At what point did you become aware that, we're in serious trouble here? And how did that manifest for you? You know, you were a one-person office, I think, or a 1.5-person office, something like that. I would imagine that you had a significant number of students abroad, and it was a stressful time.
Well, we work really closely with the UF International Center, and International Center takes the lead on ensuring the safety and knowing the whereabouts of the students when they're abroad. I mostly handle the academic portion of the students when they go abroad, but I do work very, very closely with the UFIC. It's like my second home. And I leave it up to the International Center to decide. And I was fortunate to be able to run one program. It was the Dublin Spring Break program with Learn International, where we did the Intro to Global Engineering program. And the week after we came back, I guess things started getting bad, and then we got notification that no travel from UF was allowed.
You mentioned that program. I'm keen for this podcast not to be an advertisement for Learn International or those types of things. That's an important thing. But it is something that you and I can talk about, which is a real life example of, you know, things that can go wrong on a macro level or a micro level. Somebody doesn't turn up or sick or those types of things. But that was an interesting program as you know, the openness to the groups arriving and being welcomed into the predetermined visits and things like that. It kind of froze out as the week went on. It was happening almost in real time. It's not the same as having a spring break where, as I said, somebody is sick or somebody has a baby or those types of things. That's a single component. But we were working with at the start of the week a fairly solid, okay, I think things are going to be okay, and then suddenly Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's kind of, nobody knows what's going to happen in 2 hours time, and it was happening on a global basis, and our little program had to try and figure out how it was going to work. And I think the flexibility of the group was just there, and the strong relationship, I suppose, that we have with the programs that we build. So how has COVID-19 affected you professionally on a daily basis, and then maybe personally on a daily basis? Like what's your personal experience of COVID-19?
So we had students who came back home, and we have a few students who are still abroad. They decided that they were better off abroad. So we're monitoring their progress and their situation as it goes, but we had to cancel all our summer programs. So for a lot of students, it creates a conundrum of what do they do now this summer. And even for the students who have domestic internships, some of them are getting rescinded. So there's a lot of uncertainty and discomfort among the students right now. And right now I'm planning to have a virtual coffee hour that will be open to all students to drop in, and we will chat about, so what do I do now this summer? And I plan to get different advisors from across the colleges to kind of help the students navigate this unknown time. So all our summer classes at UF will be online this summer. So with engineering classes, it's really difficult to have full online classes, which means that a lot of engineering classes are not going to be offered this summer at all, and it will have a negative impact on the students' graduation rates and tracking progress. So that's another element that we want to help students navigate, even domestic students.
In your traditional fall and spring semesters, schedules are just chock-a-block full. Labs are full, teaching loads are full, those types of things. But is there any conversation going on with you guys about how to expedite that dip in courses that this has left students with? Or is it just a situation that your education, your undergrad, your master's, whatever it is now going to take an extra semester? There's nothing you can do about it.
That's a very good question. I have not thought about the fact that all classes will be in higher demand. And I don't think right now, I have not heard anything about fall classes being online, or there have been some speculation that fall classes will be a hybrid of online and in person, but there's so much unknown right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the difficulty, I think, for institutions. It is very much not insignificant amounts of money that go into the different strategies that people take, and how much do you mitigate and put a plan in place for something that might happen? Then suddenly it doesn't happen, and maybe the state health authorities have done a great job and it wasn't needed, but there's been investment put into it, and now that's wasted. And then there's who wants to pull the trigger on these things? It's such a difficult situation, and I think that's what everybody is grappling with. And that's what really I thought about this podcast as being something that people can talk about what their individual stresses are in their roles and their institutions, which they may be parallel and almost map onto a lot of your peers in directors of international engineering program in state universities across the world, but certainly in the States. But at least we're sharing stresses and those types of things. So I'm thankful for that. But
we do have students who are still planning to study abroad in the fall for the programs who have not suspended their inbound programs. And what I tell them is that make sure you have a parallel plan to register for classes on campus in case the university abroad decides not to take students, or if the United States has a travel warning. So students have to learn to make parallel plans for when things don't work out the way they want to.
Yeah, I think Plan B, Plan C, or even Plan D are good. but in general, but right now, definitely. As long as that plan B or plan C doesn't then produce its own bottleneck in and of its own right, and dual registrations and those types of things. When you went to UF, you were engaged in an organization that promotes women in engineering, essentially. And what's going on at UF in that regard at the moment, and how successful is it?
I don't know the numbers, the gender breakdown between male and female in engineering at UF, but I do know that there's been consistent efforts to increase retention of women engineers. I think that we have women engineers who come in, but the difficulty is in retaining them because it can be an unfriendly environment for female students in engineering. And even in the faculty side, I think we do have an imbalance between female faculty and male faculty. So when you don't have role models, it can be challenging.
What's the answer to that, Ping?
Engaging students early on in meaningful classes and design classes, because I think study has shown that when students are engaged in design classes early on, they tend to do a better job in persisting in the major.
I did my first master's in sustainable development at Dublin Institute of Technology, which is now Technical University of Dublin. My master's was run through the engineering school. And at that stage, I think there was something like 94% male, 6% female in that one department. But that was really extreme. And I remember at the time thinking, even if everybody is friendly, it's still an oppressive enough situation to walk into a classroom of 50 people and have 2 other females there.
Maybe the solution is study abroad.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because, typically study abroad is tipped more towards women and, 70-30, whatever it is. I think, but that retention piece is something that's interesting, and maybe we'll come back to that again in another day. But
maybe you could get a PhD in it.
I could get a PhD in that. I think I'll leave my PhD for another few years or decades. How are you finding the change with COVID-19? How are you dealing with it? How are you staying positive?
Oh, well, we're staying at home. We're working from home, and I have my dogs to accompany me while working at home. So that really helps. And I'm not seeing as many students even online, because I don't think study abroad is a priority for them now. I think they're just trying to get through the day to day. And I'm looking forward by designing and investigating new programs that we can do to help students study abroad or even get a global experience without going abroad. I think that would be one way to insulate ourselves against future events like this, against external forces, is how can we bring the global into our classrooms without having to go abroad.
Let's unpack that a little bit. What do you think that looks like? I mean, is that happening at the moment at UF? If it is, what does it look like? If it isn't, what do you think it might look like?
I think it's happening at a faculty to faculty level, where faculty might have someone they're working with from abroad, Skyping to their classrooms and talk about what they're working on, or even give a few guest lectures.
There's definitely a bright future for that piece if it can be framed and built properly, such that it helps the likes of faculty that might be a little bit reticent in those types of things, or reticent, should I say. There's a lot of people doing different things, but yeah, I think there's a lot of potential within it. How is your remote work life? Are you finding it difficult? Does it change things for you? I know you're talking about not engaging too much with students, but that might not necessarily be different if you were on campus at this stage.
I miss the human interaction with my coworkers. I have really great coworkers, but we try to keep in touch with each other through text messages or Zoom meetings and trying to do something fun together. Right now, we have a weekly session of calligraphy scheduled after hours. So that gives us a way to engage with each other, but not talk about work.
That's fantastic. I love that idea. And can we see an example, please?
I'm just learning the basics right now, and it's not great, but I've been practicing on writing my name because that's the most important thing, right?
Of course, of course it is.
What I'm working on, but I need to practice.
Fantastic.
But that program was really amazing because it taught students what I wanted them to learn from an abroad experience without shoving it in their face. You know, like the goal of study abroad is to teach students how to be flexible, adaptable, aware of global issues. I think that that short week with the COVID-19 going on, it really achieved all that and made students aware of global issues and how we're all connected and how we have to learn to be flexible and adaptable. And I think the students really came through.
That's amazing to hear. But it's really interesting because that's the sense that we got in the office, that the group was really rolling with it. And, you know, you can have a situation where you have this group think and there can be a difficult student who just can't come out of it, and they can kind of bring everybody else with them into the grumpy room, and it's very hard to get the group back out of that. But that group just didn't do it, so it was really, really interesting.
And they were first year students mostly, and
Yeah.
they've never been abroad, so that's even more remarkable.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I'm really glad to hear that. That's wonderful. You know, if there had to be one program that was going, and it worked well, I'm glad. I'm glad that's it, because we all worked so hard on it. But it was great. You've talked a little bit about the ways that you're trying to still make some global experiences available to students. You have some ideas and some strategies that you're looking at, and you're not sure when things are going to go back to normal, but they won't go back to old normal. They'll go back to new normal. And nobody really knows what that is, but people are speculating. And so, has there been any conversation in that regard in UF, or personally, how do you think COVID-19 is going to affect international education programming, mobility, basically anything that you would like to tell us about what you think new normal looks like? We'd love to hear.
I haven't really thought much about it yet because we're still learning so much from this current situation. But my perception of something like a virtual internship has changed. Now it's proving to be a more viable path for students in this current situation. I used to think that students wouldn't want to do a virtual internship because they will want to go abroad. But there are circumstances where students face challenges and they cannot go abroad, but would still like to get an internship experience and the global experience. So providing more opportunities like that for the students will be something that I want to look into. I have no idea what the new normal will be.
Hopefully it will start to crystallize and become a little bit more evident, but I fear that we have a few months or more to go before we can see how things will play out. But you know, one of the things that you were talking about there, you know, you were so pleased about the group coming to Ireland and having the experience that they had. And you know, we have so many student stories of how such a relatively short period of time overseas can make a massive difference to students. You know, I think everybody's involved in study abroad has those 3 or 4 students that they remember their stories, and you know, it's changed the student's life for those types of things. Do you have any kind of stories you can share with us in terms of really life-altering experiences that students have had through UF engineering?
Well, I had a student and he went to a summer exchange program in Hong Kong. And while he was there, it happened to be during the period where there were protests going on in Hong Kong. And he attended the protests and he had stories to tell about that. And when he came back, he made a video about his exchange experience, about going abroad, and his video is now going to be featured on the College of Engineering website. He is going to intern with KPMG over the summer, and he took part in a case competition with KPMG and won the national level. They were supposed to fly them to Seoul, but it's been pushed back to August. And I'm so excited for all the opportunities he has. I started a group called International Engineering Ambassadors to help students study abroad. So the idea is that returning students will talk to students who are interested to tell them about their experience, but they will also serve as buddies for incoming students, help them navigate life in UF and Gainesville. And he emailed me to tell me that he's just been elected president for the next year. So I'm really thrilled to be working with him. I think that it will be really fun.
That's amazing. That sense of confidence that students can get. I reflect on my own undergrad And I was blissfully unaware of anything other than the bare minimum I need to do to graduate. Any activities I just ignored
Me too.
to my own detriment. But it's, the spectrum of opportunity for students is just so huge. And each one of those experiences allows them to gain a little bit more confidence and competence in particular areas that they're interested in.
I had a student who studied abroad at Brisbane, Australia. She met her boyfriend who was studying abroad there from New York, NYU, or somewhere in New York City. And they met while they were both study abroad students, and now they're engaged.
That's amazing. I remember the first day of the first program we ran with a summer school for Maynooth University, and we had 50 or 60 students that came into it. And on the first day when we're doing our orientation walk, this guy drops to a knee and pulls out a ring, and I was like, oh my God, what are the parents going to say? They were from North Carolina. They're the loveliest couple, and I follow them on Facebook, and they're buying houses and doing all these things and moving on with life. And it's wonderful to see those types of things. But I remember thinking, oh, here we go. So what's the silver lining thing? Again, I don't want to be insensitive, but we have to try and stay as positive as we can. The crisis is ongoing at the moment. It's changed everybody's personal and professional life. Sometimes I stop and think, oh my God, it's changed everybody's life. Even those that are still going to the offices have to go through different processes, not the same as it was before for them. So how do you stay positive? What is the silver lining for you in what we're going through at the moment? Is there one?
There definitely is a silver lining, and professionally, it has taught me that we need to innovate and be more adaptable to circumstances, and international higher ed is the best way to learn how to navigate global issues like this. But personally, everyone said this is a great pause, and I have learned that I should take more time out to connect with friends, and I have been talking to my friends more and calling them on the phone versus just through text messages or Facebook. And in a way, even though we are physically apart, I feel more connected to some of my friends that I've been making an effort to reach out to.
I feel the same way. I have a weekly call with a few of my buddies I grew up with, and I might talk to one of them twice a year, and now it's every week. So that's a wonderful thing. I love to hear that. So I want to just thank you so much for your time. It's been really great chatting. We've talked through so many different things today, and I know I'm going to have to edit this down, but I really don't want to because it's been so interesting. I think hopefully the new normal will look something like the old normal, but a little bit better. For the listeners, thanks so much for staying with us. And I hope that there's been some positive pieces for you and that you can share some empathy in terms of the stresses that we are all feeling. This has been a podcast for Coffee with Cow from Learn International. Tune in again next week, and I'm not sure who it'll be, but we'll have somebody else from international education talking through how this crisis is affecting them and what they see as new normal. Until then, stay safe, stay home, and be kind.
Bye.